Hi, I'm Neha Vishisht Mahajan. Welcome to a budget special episode of ET Markets exclusive only on ET Markets live stream. So today the Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman announced the whole union budget in which a lot of changes were introduced, especially when it comes to taxations. So we are going to discuss all about that in today's special episode. To discuss more on this, we have Mr. Chandar Talreja with us, partner at Wildo Partners. Thank you so much, Mr. Chandar, for joining us today on ET Markets live stream.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the big question. How was the budget when it comes to taxations?
I think it's a very kind of a balanced budget which has come into picture. And again, if you see from 2014, since the government has come into power, the focus has been on tax simplification, reducing the tax complexities and the litigation part also around it.
Right.
And on the same parameters, they continue to focus around it. Be it with rationalization of the capital gain scheme which they brought. Then in terms of the litigation parameters and all, income escaping assessment, Vivas for the appeals pending and all. So again, the focus of the government is just to create that transparency and reduce tax uncertainties, reduce that complexities which are there. She spoke in the speech around that, we're going to aim to make this income tax act very, very simple around it. They're going to focus around, in 6 months' time to work around those bits. So it's a very welcome move around, in terms of the budget and all.
All right. So now let's talk about standard deduction part. So I think most of the tax expert and taxpayers also were looking for relief when it comes to standard deduction, which now has been hiked to 75,000 from 50,000 earlier. What are your thoughts on that? What do you want to add to this?
I mean, if you see this budget from an individual taxation perspective, it's a very win-win situation for all the salaried people and all. One is in terms of, the standard deduction, and this standard deduction, the hike which is being allowed is specifically for people opting for new personal tax regime. The focus of the government, in kind of a budget 2020, they introduced new personal tax regime. The focus has been to promote it and to ensure that more and more people, are opting for new personal tax regime. She mentioned in the speech that, they have certain data where 2/3 of the people in the last fiscal year have gone for new personal tax regime also, which is again encouraging because new personal tax regime offers concessional tax rate. Of course, you need to forego certain deduction and exemption. And if you see the Income Tax Act totally, around 70 deduction and exemption out of more than 100 exemption and deduction were removed. And our aim is to, rationalize the remaining one also. Now, when you come to, this standard deduction per se, it was neat. If you see the salaried class, most of, people are on a hybrid model. There are expenses which are being, incurred across and all. And of course, inflationary factor also needs to account for. So the hike of 25,000 is a welcome step, and of course, it brings cheers to the the salaried class people.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chandar, one more follow-up question regarding this only. Do you think that the government is trying to make the new regime more and more attractive to eventually, so that eventually the old regime fades out? Do you think that there is a possibility of that?
Yes, there is a possibility, but it still takes a bit of time around it, because if you see old regime per se, it still gives you a lot of deduction and exemption. The common ones being the HRA, LTA, housing loan deduction, the ATC limit and all, with regard to 1,50,000 and all. Those deductions are all available, which aren't available per se, when you look at the new personal tax regime. And, people have their sentiments attached to it. So, old regime is going to stay for a while. What government is trying to promote is, in terms of the simplification of tax structure, they're trying to give you flexibility. You choose a regime as per on your requirements and all. We need to cater to the thing that, there's a big housing loan market in terms of bank, financial institution, giving the loans. And one of the things which goes about is that you got tax benefit attached with it. If old regime were to take away, there would be, kind of a major challenge for that. Again, in terms of investment deduction, the ATC deduction, it's pretty common for people to invest. And people do invest, in one of the ways is to get those tax benefit. So it's a mixed situation. I mean, depending on the situation of the individual, he or she is going to opt for old regime or new regime. But the focus of the government is to promote new regime. And down the line, it might look at, old regime being fading out, but personal circumstances will always, be material to determine that.
Absolutely. So let's also talk a little bit more about the tax rate structure that has been revised for the new regime. So for 0 to 3 lakh rupees, it's nil. 3 to 7 lakh is 5%. 7 to 10 is 10%. Then we have 10 to 12 bracket, which will attract 15%. And then 12 to 15 lakh will attract 20%. And lastly, we have 15 lakh and above that will attract around 30%. So I want to understand, how is it going to provide relief to the common man, and what are your thoughts on this move by the government?
See, this was the first budget after coming into power for the third term, and it had to be, there something should be there for the common man. In terms of providing that benefit, what they did was that they brought in this new slab for the new personal tax regime only, and what they've given the benefit is 18,200. So it's 17,500 plus the surcharge bit, which saves. So it works out to be 18,200, where surcharge is not applicable. You've got the cess and the tax coming into play. So that benefit is being passed on to the the common man, so that his purchasing power can increase a little bit around it, and there are certain saving from a tax liability perspective.
Right.
So it brings smile to everyone, is because this is applicable not only for salaried but non-salaried individuals also. Kind of a welcome move around.
All right. Along with this, the deduction on pensioners for family pension has also been increased from 15,000 to 25,000. Now, as per the government, it will provide relief to 4 crore salaried and pensioners. What do you think about this? How it's going to help in people in the long term?
See, again, if you see budget 2023 was the first year when standard deduction and family pension deduction was allowed under the new personal tax regime. Continuing the same focus, what she's done in this budget is that these limits have been hiked. A standard deduction we spoke about from 50 to 75, and this one has gone from 15 to 25. So it's going to benefit a lot major population around it, whomsoever is opting for new personal tax regime, because these benefit, the hike ones this year, which is proposed in the budget, they aren't available in the old regime.
Right.
So focus is again, the new personal tax regime, and it's going to benefit a lot of population around it.
All right. So when we talk about taxation, the most important thing when it comes to equity markets is short-term capital gains and long-term capital gains, and a lot was talked about these two in today's budget speech as well. People seem to be disappointed when it comes to short-term capital gains tax and long-term also. Everything has been hiked instead of providing a relief to the investors. What are your thoughts on the hikes?
So, I mean, see, somewhere the thought was the rationalization of capital gain provisions was required, because there are plethora of sections, etc., which are trying different kind of tax rates and all. So she's again worked on the rationalization and simplification of the capital gain structure. Now, what my thing is that what she's trying to give is the real investor, whomsoever is here for the long term in the market, that benefit. So what she's done is, from a classification of a capital asset, you've got a period of holding of up to 12 months and all. Okay, for it to qualify as short term. Beyond that is long term and all, and this is applicable across in terms of listed securities, etc., coming into picture and all. Under the existing provision, the unlisted share, the immovable property, they had the period of holding as 2 years only. Okay. Now, with regard to the debentures, okay, the bonds, the gold, earlier holding was kind of a 36 months, which has been brought down to 2 years, kind of 24 months around it. So this is the change which is brought to reduce the period of holding to get them into long-term bracket, which is kind of a positive thing. From 36 to 24 months, they are trying to bring it down over there. When you look at the short-term capital gain, section 111A, the rate was for listed equity shares, equity-oriented units was 15%. Now, whomsoever is there in the market for short term, less than kind of a 12-month period, she's saying you pay more tax over there. If you want to make some gain around in short term, you pay more tax around. And the criteria, if you read the memorandum, what they mentioned is some kind of a high net worth individual use this mechanism to play, because their marginal rate might be applicable is 39%. I'm just taking the maximum marginal rate. Over here is 15% plus the applicable surcharge and the cess which might come into picture. So she's brought down to 20%. She's increased it to 20% to cater to those set of individuals who are there in the market just for the short term. Okay. The other change, the bigger change which came was from a long-term capital gain perspective. Right. Okay. Again, when you're looking at this listed equity shares, equity-oriented units and all, presently they were taxed only at the rate of 10%, and up to 1 lakh the exemption was there. She's increased this to 1.25, 1,25,000 over there, and the rate has also been increased to 12.5. Now, in terms of the investor, the middle class, the lower income level, whomsoever is trying to invest, the gain she's trying to put that limit that up to 1 lakh was there earlier. I'm just increasing it another by 25% more now to make it sustainable for them. But beyond that, people who are there again, from a long-term perspective, they should pay a tax of 12.5 over here. And this rate, 12.5, is not only for these kind of securities which I mentioned. This is applicable across. Yeah. You talk about listed debentures, you talk about the property and all, they are also becoming. So earlier the rate on this immovable property, etc., in the long term was 20%, which has been brought down by 7.5% to 12.5. Of course, the unlisted debentures, the bonds, etc., they've been taken separately at the, under Section 50 AA as the kind of being taxed at the applicable rate as short term and all. That is, she's put forward and all. But overall, she's trying to balance it out in terms of the things coming over there. The bigger chunk which comes is she's not allowing the indexation benefit around this long term now, which was normally applicable. Because she's got that 20% down to 12.5. Hence, this is being looked into, that no indexation is being allowed. That might be the thought process around it. It again, depend from a person's situation and all, how this will be, beneficial and all. Of course, for long-term asset and all, indexation benefit is always required. It helps reduce the gains a bit and all. Okay. And that marriage would need to be done in terms of the rate coming down, in terms of, the indexation cost per se. But this might be the thought process and all. But indexation benefit, this is where, when you say the sentiments are not that much great, this is contributing to that. Indexation benefits are not being allowed.
All right. So before we close our session for today, one last thing I would like to discuss with you is about the simplification of reassessment for ITRs. So the finance minister talked about that in depth. I want to understand, can you just simplify it for the viewers for us?
Sure. So see, under the existing provision, how it works is that you can, if the department has any information with regard to any income escaping assessment and all, you can open that return within a period of 3 years from the close of the assessment year, relevant assessment year. The department again can, open that return beyond 3 years if the income which is thought to be, assessed is 50 lakhs or more. And this the period allowed is between 3 to 10 years. So this is a large window. Like I mentioned, she wants to reduce the tax litigation, provide more transparency and all. Under that initiative, what they've done is that 0 to 3 years still remains. You can still open it out and all. From 3, the window has gone to 5 years, which was earlier 10 years. So 5 years, they got to reduce. They say we can open beyond 3 years, but up to 5 years only. And the income capping is 50 lakhs or more only. So this is a kind of a welcome move she's provided, that your return would not be opened by the tax authorities beyond 5 years from the close of the assessment year, which was earlier kind of a 10 years. Again, she's trying to provide more kind of a tax certainty around it, trying to ensure more tax transparency, so that it's a kind of a happy kind of a taxpayers which is there with them.
All right. Okay. So, Mr. Chandar, any closing remarks you would like to give the audience for the taxation and people who are sweating it out when it comes to equity markets?
I think the message is pretty clear around being a kind of a long-term investor would be beneficial around it. Okay, and again, situation depends, varies from individual to individual. Some might be there as a short-term players and all, but see as per your situation and invest. And markets were booming. I don't know the current situation and all, how they taken the budget around it, but of course, these movement from a capital gain perspective are required, and that leads to more of a kind of a rationalization and simplification.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Chandra, for joining us today on ET Markets live stream and talking all about taxation and the budget 2024.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you so much.